What is up, my friends and fellow busy bees? Welcome back to another installment in the 101 series, where I'm going to be giving you a high-level overview all about different top coat options you have when painting or refinishing your furniture pieces. If you haven't already heard them, I'll also leave a link in the show notes of this episode for the other episodes in the series that I have covered to date, which are Paintbrushes 101, Mineral Paint 101, Chalk Paint 101, and Furniture Strippers 101. In these episodes, I like to go back to basics and let you know what the products are, what they're made of, how they differ from each other, the pros and cons of each, the way to get the best finish when using them, and then any helpful tips or recommendations I may have from my years of doing this work. And if you ever have any suggestions for another installment in the 101 series, please always feel free to reach out to me because I don't know what you need unless I hear it from you. So feel free to send me a DM on Instagram at MelDidItHerself or shoot me an email and let me know what you'd like to hear a deep dive and overview on, and I would be happy to put that together. Alright, now there are certainly some projects where this may not be the case, but I'm going to generalize and say on the whole, for every furniture makeover you do, you're going to want to add some sort of top coat after doing whatever finish you put on your piece. Certain things like all-in-one paints, stains and poly mixes, and other types of paints say that you don't need to add an additional top coat because there's already one built in, or the finish will harden to the point that a top coat is not needed. That is great, love that, but personally I'm always going to be putting a top coat on in addition to that, since I'm selling my pieces and I know how I would treat them, but I don't necessarily know how a client will, or if they have kids or furry friends who are in the house who may also be abusing it. I always want my finishes to perform to their fullest and for clients to be happy with the product that they get. So at a minimum, I'm always adding a top coat to the high points of a piece that will get the most wear and tear. Things like a dining room table, the top of a dresser, or the top of nightstands. You know, the stuff that takes the most beating. So because of how integral I think a top coat is to the furniture painting and refinishing process, I think it's important to understand your different options that are available, which makes the most sense for the different projects you're working on, and how to achieve the best finish. So let's hop into some of our options. So your first option, and one you may have heard of before because it's quite popular, is a polyurethane, which is a thin, clear liquid coating that is essentially plastic. It's a polymer coating, so although it's often compared to shellacs, varnishes, and lacquers, it's different in this way. Since it's made of polymers, you typically choose a polyurethane when your goal is to have the coating be super durable. For example, wood floors are often top coated with a poly. But within this, you do have a couple different types to choose from: water-based and oil-based. Water-based polyurethane is the top coat I most commonly choose for my furniture upcycling projects. I found a statistic that it's actually the go-to choice for over 60% of DIYers, since it is so low odor and it has very easy cleanup. It also dries quickly, so you can complete your projects in a shorter amount of time, which is a major key for me as someone who is running a business doing furniture refinishing, because time is money, baby. However, it is worth noting that these products tend to react with the grain of your wood, so you do typically need to apply more coats if you want to have a really smooth finish. I normally am putting 3 to 4 coats of water-based poly on my pieces for this reason, and also to ensure that the durability is there long-term and the finish is properly protected. And you can put unlimited coats of water-based poly over one another as long as they've dried enough in between, so you can really work up the thickness of that finish. When it comes to cleanup, I mentioned that water-based poly is easy cleanup because it just requires soap and water, so you aren't having to work with any chemicals or anything too crazy, so that's super ideal for me because I'm all about quick and easy solutions. I also choose the water-based version because it dries clear. Whereas with the oil-based polyurethanes, there is a tendency for them to yellow over time, and this isn't necessarily a big deal if you either like that amber look or you are painting with dark colors, but especially if you're painting something white or want the wood color to remain the same once you apply that top coat, you'll want to steer clear of an oil-based poly. Just know that if you do use it, that yellowing will continue to intensify over time. If you look at older wood finishes, you'll see this a lot. It's that kind of yellowed oak kind of look. That's because it was probably an oil-based poly that was used and then developed that yellow tinge over time. The difference between this option and a water-based equivalent is that it uses different petroleum and mineral solvents as the vehicle for the polyurethane solids, which allows the urethane resin to level and then form into a cured film, which does make it really scratch resistant. #science. But just note that this does make the product more toxic and flammable, so make sure you take proper precautions when using it. And as I always say, read the directions and check out the safety data sheet to acquaint yourself with the manufacturer's recommendations prior to use. However, the oil-based poly doesn't react with the wood grain in the same way, so you don't need to do as many coats when opting for an oil-based product. A good rule of thumb is that you would need at least 2 coats of water-based poly for every coat of oil-based. So it could be more economical to choose an oil-based polyurethane depending on your project, but again, it does take longer to dry, so make sure you take that into account. When it comes to cleanup, since we know by now that water and oil do not mix, you do need to use mineral spirits or paint thinner to clean off oil-based poly from yourself or your tools or whatever you're using to apply it. So make sure that you have that handy before jumping into your project if you opt to use this on your furniture flips so that you don't accidentally ruin your favorite paintbrush. Totally not speaking from experience on that one. Just kidding, yes I am. Rest in peace to my first zebra fan brush. You are missed. Now moving away from the world of polyurethanes, the next top coat option on the list is a lacquer. Now, full disclosure, I've never used this option myself, so I had a great time deep diving and learning all about it while researching for this episode, so if this is new for you too, just know that you're not alone. So what I have found, using a lacquer as a top coat is going to give you a really beautiful glossy finish, but it's not very forgiving, so you're going to notice any imperfections or mistakes that you make in the finish a little bit more than some of the other options. So I wouldn't call this probably like a beginner choice. However, it is super durable, more durable than a shellac, and it's a really thin consistency, so it's to be applied in multiple thin coats versus trying to really build up that finish in lesser coats. But on the plus side, it dries really quickly, so it's got that going for it, which is nice. And there are 3 main types of lacquer that I came across. The first being nitrocellulose lacquer, which is a basic lacquer in its simplest form that is made by mixing solvents with wood and cotton pulp that has cellulose in it and has been broken down by nitric and sulfuric acid. It has a slightly amber color that enhances light and dark woods with a warm tone and is relatively inexpensive. And it does dry quickly initially, however, the curing time can take upwards of a month, so again, just keep that in mind. The second lacquer option is an acrylic lacquer, which are water clear and don't have the same yellowing properties that the nitrocellulose one has. Because of this, it's great for light colored woods that you want to remain looking like that, like ash, birch, and maple. In comparison, it also dries to a more flexible film, so it's a finish that's less brittle. The most common type is a CAB or a cab acrylic lacquer, which is made with cellulose, acetate, butyrate, and acrylic resins for anybody that's interested. Just really leaning into my 12U chemistry class here. Humble brag, I did drop out of it. And that might be getting a little bit too into the weeds here, but I mean, it's good trivia knowledge to have, don't you think? Alright, and the third type of lacquer is a catalyzed lacquer, which is a hybrid reactive, so it actually cures chemically, not through the evaporation of solvents like the other two. And these are urea resins added to this option, which apparently makes it much more durable. Now let's move on to a top coat option that I have used in the past and periodically do on the right projects, which is a wax. Wax provides a soft, matte finish, and since it's so soft, it isn't ideal for more high-traffic furniture. It's most commonly used for chalk-painted or milk-painted furniture because it's porous, so the wax can really absorb into that surface. I've also used it on some antique kind of bare wood pieces just to highlight that beautiful wood grain and give it that soft sheen, and it really looks awesome. And once the wax hardens, it seals that surface and creates a barrier that repels both water and humidity. To apply it, you just rub the wax onto the furniture with a soft, lint-free cloth, so that could even be an old t-shirt that you cut up, or a shop towel, and then you rub it off, and then you can control the sheen by buffing it further if you want more of a sheen in the finish versus that kind of matte look. In addition to not providing a super durable finish, you'll also want to reapply the wax to the furniture piece roughly every year to keep it looking good and to keep your furniture protected. So it does require some upkeep. And with wax, you have the option as well to use it as a finish to add other elements to your piece by using black, brown, or white wax, for example. You can even get metallic waxes and use it on things like hardware or details on the piece to highlight them, but I won't get too deep into that today since it's not a top coating function. So we talked about polyurethane, but there's another option that sounds similar, but it's its own separate type of top coat, which is a polycrylic. So the polycrylic only comes in a water-based formula, so that is one distinction, and it's not quite as durable as a polyurethane, especially the oil-based versions. I have used polycrylic in the past and I don't hate it. I do find that polyurethane is a little easier for me to apply, so I typically will choose that over a polycrylic, but I do find them very similar and it's super kind of niche, but I will say the Minwax Polycrylic container is maybe my favorite paint or stain or top coat container that I've ever used. And let me tell you why. I've done a TikTok video all about this. Number one, it is so durable in terms of like keeping the lid on. I have accidentally thrown it literally across the room one time. I couldn't even tell you what happened, but I don't know. I flinched or something happened and it like sent this brand new container flying across the room, and it fell very hard on the floor and did not open, did not leak, did not crack, which was very impressive because it is a plastic container. But the way that they have done the lip, number one, the product does not end up kind of pooling in the rim in the same way that it does on some other products because it's plastic and the polycrylic is that kind of plasticky finish. If it does pool in that lip, once it dries, you can just peel it off, and not only do you get the satisfaction of like when you were in school and would put that school glue on your hand and then like let it dry and then peel it off your hand. Don't know if that was just me, but that was a pretty satisfying part of my childhood. And so you could do that, and also then it peels off super easily, and so it's not like gumming up that rim, so you can close it properly and tightly so that air doesn't get into it. If I wasn't so lazy, would put together a petition for all polyurethanes, top coats, etc. to be in this kind of a container. Although it is plastic and I get it that people aren't into that anymore, but like just from a user standpoint, I love it. However, I just find that, at least for the formulas that I've tried, polycrylic doesn't seem to have the same self-leveling properties. So I was finding that I would sometimes end up with little dimples kind of in my finish instead of that flat, smooth look. And it can also look cloudy or streaky sometimes if you aren't careful with applying it properly. However, it does clean up easily with soap and water since it's water-based, so that is a plus. And it does dry quickly and doesn't yellow over time, so it's safe to use over all colors, which we love. If you are putting it over a darker color, this is one that I would definitely recommend mixing a little bit of the paint into the top coat, just to ensure that you don't end up with that cloudy, sort of streaky finish, just to be on the safe side. So grab a separate container, put however much top coat you think you're going to need, and then put like a little like plop of paint in. You don't need a lot, but just a little bit to tint it. And then I find that it will look much more clear / opaque when you put it on, and you won't see any of those cloudy, streaky additives. The last category of top coat options are oils, of which there are a few options to choose from. First up is linseed oil, which is allegedly one of the best oils to use for wood finishes because it penetrates deep into the grain of the wood and gives it a rich color and also protects it against moisture. Another option I came across was lemon oil, which I have not used, but helps protect your wood furniture by repelling insects and molds. It keeps away dirt and dust particles too, which means that your furniture stays cleaner longer, and it can also be used to seal your wood furniture by mixing 2 parts of lemon oil to 1 part mineral spirits. Mineral oil is another option you may have heard of before, which provides excellent protection against mold and mildew growth. And mineral oil is also non-flammable and won't stain your furniture, which makes it a great choice for some people for certain projects. And the last 2, which I have used in the past, are firstly tung oil, which also works well for preserving wood furniture. Tung oil is often recommended as a sealing oil for furniture because it protects the wood from moisture and stains, and it dries really quickly to a flexible, food-safe finish. The other one being hemp oil, which I have used in the past, and it is also food safe, so those are great choices for things like charcuterie boards or cutting boards as well, if you're looking for something that's specifically food safe. As you can see, there are a lot of options to choose from when you're deciding which top coat finish you want to use to protect your furniture makeovers. To choose the most ideal one, you'll want to consider factors like the piece's purpose and how much use it's going to get, the climate that you're in, and the paint, stain, or other finish that you're trying to seal in and protect. And I guess I didn't really talk about like my favorite options, so let me just walk through those really quickly, just off the top of my head. So currently, my go-to top coat for just your average project is the Behr fast-drying water-based polyurethane. Number 1, because I can get it easily. I get it from Home Depot. It's kind of always in stock for the most part, and there's been a few ones that I've used in the past that are now harder to get my hands on, so this is kind of why I use it, but it dries really beautifully. I find that their matte option is a little bit, not shinier, but it has a slight sheen to it, more than your average matte polyurethane. So it's somewhere in between a flat and a satin, which actually looks really nice. And I've also used their satin. That's kind of like my go-to that I'll use. But it's just been very consistent. I don't get that cloudiness. It's self-leveling. It dries quickly. It seems to hold up really nicely. So that's kind of my current go-to. I also, for a very long time, used the General Finishes high-performance water-based top coat in, well, that one I've used their flat, their satin, and their semi-gloss. So that's also a really nice one if you have access to that. I just was getting it from a stockist that now no longer carries it, so it's become a little bit more expensive for me to acquire it, but always had a really beautiful finish. In terms of a wax, I've tried a few different ones. Probably the one I most commonly go back to are the Annie Sloan waxes, just because, it's Annie Sloan, it's tried and true. If you're looking for chalk paint or any chalk paint related products, she's the GOAT. So I've had great success with that. I've tried the clear one for sure, as well as the brown and I think the white wax as well. Another thing with waxes is that you can mix different colors into a clear wax if you're interested in getting a little bit more decorative in that way, so that's always an option as well. For a polycrylic, the Minwax Polycrylic, like I mentioned, is probably the one I would most often choose, although, like I said, I don't typically opt for that over a polyurethane. For an oil-based polyurethane, the Minwax one I have used. It held up great. I think it's called the Helmsman or something like that, the one that I used. And I had specifically chosen that because I was doing a outdoor bench that was going to be like kind of covered under a bit of a porch, but it was going to be exposed to the elements. So I wanted to make sure that it could withstand getting water on it, heat, cold, that kind of thing. So I used a oil-based for that purpose. And if I'm going to be using an oil, the only one I really have in stock is the hemp oil from Fusion Mineral Paint, which I've used on a few pieces, and works great, smells great, it's food safe, no complaints. Going back to polyurethane, one that I've used in the past and really liked, I just don't often see it at the Home Depot that I go to now. And I don't know if it's maybe rebranded or something. And I know it's called something different in the States. So I'm going to butcher this right now because I didn't look it up. But it was the Varathane water-based polyurethane. And I think it used to be called like Diamond Finish or something like that. But it performed really well. But again, it was just during COVID out of stock all the time, and then now I'm not seeing it stocked as much there. I think because Behr now has their own line that they are pushing a little bit more at Home Depot, so you can probably find that elsewhere, but that was one that I really enjoyed as well. And they have like a triple thick version or something where it's essentially 3 coats in one. And I have tried that in the past and it worked really well and gave you that really durable looking finish in less coats. Kind of didn't know if it was going to be a little gimmicky, but it seemed to hold up well. So if you've been thinking of trying that out, it has my seal of approval. Another thing to keep in mind is that no matter how perfect the top coat match is to your piece, you're not going to be able to properly protect the finish and keep everything looking great if you didn't do the proper process to get a great finish prior to that step. So there's no magic involved here. Just make sure that you're doing the proper prep to thoroughly clean your piece before working on it, waiting the proper amount of drying time before adding more layers of finish on, and also lightly sanding between each layer of paint, stain, or other finish or your top coat is going to make sure that you end up with a smooth surface, something high grit, like 250 grit or higher, just to lightly smooth out that surface, make sure there's no bumps or like dog hairs stuck in that finish or anything. You can sand it away, get it nice and smooth, and then put your next coat on. Do not sand it after your final coat, and it will be looking nice and clear and beautiful. Sticking to these steps and reading the directions on all products that you're using will be sure to set you and your piece up for success. Happy flipping! And something that you may not know about me, I love little motivational messages. They always get me fired up, and I keep a running list of ones that are especially catchy or speak to me in the Notes app on my phone. And so I end every podcast episode with one of those that I've noted down over the years in hopes that you leave our time here each week feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on whatever comes your way this week. So this week's Mel's motivational message comes from a book that I recently reread called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. If you haven't read it, it's a pretty good read. If you don't like swearing, don't read it. He says fuck a lot, but it's a good kind of like self-improvement and like seeing the world for what it is kind of book. So if you're looking for something like that, if you're in the middle of an existential crisis, give it a go. It might help you out. But the quote is, "We can be truly successful only at something we're willing to fail at. If we're unwilling to fail, then we're unwilling to succeed." And of course, this is a quote that can be a very overarching in any area of life, but in relation to the podcast episode today, I went over a lot of different options for top coats, and if you're new at this and you either have only done a couple furniture flips or you're kind of thinking about doing your own first one and you're getting overwhelmed by all the options, that's okay. Everybody was there at one point. Do your research and choose what you think will be what sounds like it makes the most sense for what you're looking to do. But really, you just need to try these products out for yourself over time and get the hang of them. Figure out what works best for you. Like I said, I tried polyacrylics in the past, didn't love them as much. Tried polyurethanes, and those work better for me and the way that I like to apply them and the finish that I'm able to achieve. But that doesn't mean that that's going to be the same for you. And unfortunately, the only way to figure this stuff out is to try, is to do. And the finish that I get today isn't the finish that I was getting 3 years ago. You learn things, you make mistakes and then adapt. You hear tips and tricks from other people, and eventually you're able to fine-tune that over time. So you have to be willing to fail at something and just give it a go and then learn from it and move forward with that new knowledge on your next makeover or whatever task it is that you're tackling. So whether it is a furniture upcycling project or something else that you have going on in your life that you have been hesitant about taking on because you don't feel like you're ready, because you don't have all the information, because you don't think you're capable or able to do it. Remember that if you're unwilling to fail, then you're unwilling to succeed. So just take that next step, figure out what needs to get done. Maybe it goes great, maybe it doesn't, but either way, you learn something really valuable and you tried that thing out, and that's pretty fucking badass to do, period, hard stop. And also, then you'll learn something for the next time that you do it, or it will be less scary the next time that you do it, or you'll now know what you need to do or what you don't need to do in order to do it the next time. We can only be truly successful at something that we're willing to fail at. So get out there and start failing this week, busy bees. All right, that's it for now. I appreciate your time, and I will catch